All right, hi everybody. Today we are going to be talking to you about the four most predominant approaches to general music education in the United States. Those four approaches are the Kadai method, the Orff-Schulwerk method, the music learning theory, and the Dalcroze eurythmics. So we are going to dive right in with the Kadai approach. The quote you see now on the screen is basically the guiding principle to the Kadai approach. When he refers to building castles in Spain there at the end of the quote, he's basically saying, in other words, a lofty or impossible goal. So a little bit about the background of Zoltan Kodály. A lot of his philosophy and guidance came from studying and being immersed in folk music. He was a Hungarian composer, but he went on some folk expeditions with Bela Bartok early in the 1900s. He felt that it was important to get to the essence of a lot of cultures, and so he then took influence from all those cultures, folk music, and began composing songs for children's choruses in the early 1920s. He refers to folk as the basis and inspiration for many of those compositions for children's choruses. By 1929, he decided that he wanted to reform music teaching as a whole. So he wanted to emphasize music as an integral subject in education. He wanted it to be a core subject, just like a math or reading or science class would be. So he encouraged his colleagues and pupils to travel throughout Europe and seek out the very best musicians to learn from. Kodály said that music instruction should begin 9 months before the birth of the student's mother. As early as possible, he wanted to get students learning music. So the Kodály approach is more of a philosophy than a teaching method. Some of the other teaching methods that we'll be talking about kind of have a specific kind of goal you want to keep in mind as you're teaching. You want to set out this method. The Kodály approach is more of just the thought about it in general. So it's that emphasis on teaching music early. You just want to start teaching music really early, and you want it to be part of your culture, this role of music in society. You want it to be cultural as well as everybody's music. You want to teach everyone music because not only the best and brightest deserve to get a music education. Anybody is able to learn music education, and he says that the best way to do that is by first-hand active music making. The best way to make music is by making music. So the methodology that you can kind of think of for the Kodály method is sort of this thinking, understanding, doing cycle. So you always start with thinking about the music, and you maybe hearing it, maybe getting some kind of rep in your mind. Somebody might sing something to you or play something to you so you can think about it. Then you're taught how it actually goes, so you start to understand it, and then you yourself do it. And then when that cycle is done, you do it again with more involved music or any new piece that you learn. With Kodály, he says that the best materials for teaching are only materials of the absolute highest artistic caliber. So you aren't teaching with quote-unquote easy pieces, though they aren't necessarily hard. They can be easy pieces, but they aren't easy for the sake of being easy to learn. They always have some kind of artistic character to them. And so these children's choruses that he composed for early on, he continued to compose for children's choruses throughout the rest of his life, and eventually came up with the Kodály Choral Library, which is a collection of a bunch of folk song arrangements that are specifically written for musical literacy and the understanding of forms and styles. And he wrote these specifically with the idea in mind of educating young children. And along those same lines, it is the choral library, not the instrumental library. The essence of the Kodály approach is in singing. It's not in playing instruments, though those can come into play throughout the Kodály approach. But the essence of the Kodály approach is in singing. Because singing is is a path to any culture. All cultures can sing. You can learn all music by just singing, and thus you can also then later on learn to write and read the music. So you shouldn't just focus on learning the music by playing it or singing it, but you should also learn how to read and write it. So some of the essential materials for the Kadai approach are authentic children's musical materials, authentic music of children's cultures, authentic folk music of other cultures, reading examples and exercises based on music of oral traditions, and the best art music written by master composers. So if you can tell by this list here, Kodai's approach and emphasis is heavy on culture, as well as tradition, as well as that art music that we mentioned a little bit earlier. Everything has a background and everything has a purpose and a very, very high artistic caliber. As mentioned before, singing is the essence of the Kodai approach. So a few things that help the singing move faster in the Kodai approach are using the movable do system. So anytime you move to a different key, the key of that piece will always be do. Kodai emphasizes the use of hand signs to reinforce the syllables as well as allow a physical interaction with the singing. Along with the hand symbols and movable do, he suggests some kind of syllabic notation, verbal syllabic notation for the rhythms. So some kind of ta, ti, or tika tika, whatever is preferred by the teacher, as long as there are consistent syllables chosen for various rhythms. And then when beginning to write the music that the kids are singing and learning, Kodai prefers to use stick or solfa notation. There are a few examples up here on the slide on your screen right now that you can see how the stick notation works. You can see the eighth notes. They have no note heads, but they do have the solfege syllables, the first letter of the solfege syllables. So our first line of this picture would be la, 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 do, do, la. So as I said before, there's really no specific progression of instruction that is defined by Kodai, but the general progression that Kodai suggests is moving from sound to sight. So always start with something that the students hear. Move from known to unknown, so always start with something that the students recognize. Move from simple to complex, so always start with something that is more easily understood quickly. And move from concrete to abstract. So before you start to add meaning to the music, you of course have to learn the music itself. You'll see at the bottom of the screen another progression that kind of encapsulates all of these four individual progressions from the lesser to the greater into one big line and progression of instruction. To continue with that progression, rather than kind of ethereal terms that we can use, some specific things and the specific progression that Kodai would suggest are moving from rhythm, learning the rhythm of a piece first, then learning the melody, then learning the form, then the harmony, then how to express the piece, learning the style of the piece, and then applying the terminology and symbols that actually define and describe what everything just learned is. And then a few of those skills that Kodai ultimately wants to develop in students are here at the bottom of your screen right now in this list. The Kodai approach also, in the end, as a whole, implements this 5-phase instructional sequence. Beginning with the prepare phase, preparing all of the work as you would with any lesson. The second phase would be the make conscious phase, So actually presenting the information and bringing it to the forefront of the students' minds. Moving on to the reinforcement phase, where you would run the pieces and make sure the students actually understand it, not just have it at the forefront of their mind so they're thinking about it, but rather they are actually living it and doing it. Then you would move on to the practice phase, which is self-explanatory, in that you would rehearse what you have just learned and what you've reinforced, and ultimately at the end, the goal and the last phase of instruction would be the creating phase, where you would then add expression and artistry to everything that you've just learned. So that's the Kodai approach. Next we'll be talking about the Orff Schulwerk approach. But if you want to see a sample lesson of the Kodai approach in action, check out the bio. We will have links to all of the approaches in the bio, and those will be appropriately labeled.
All right, so the next method that we're going to be talking about is the Orff Schulwerk method. And the quote that you see on your screen here is probably the embodiment of the whole idea of Orff Schulwerk. It says that since the beginning of time, children have not liked to study, which is pretty true in all aspects. And so the Orff Schulwerk method is basically trying to trick the kids into learning without them knowing that they're actually learning something. So let's get started on a little biography of Karl Orff. Karl Orff was born in 1895, and died in 1982. So he was a German composer from Munich. Some of his first published works were at the age of 16, and his composing style is very much of like Richard Strauss. He's most famous for the Orff Schulwerk and his Carmina Burana. So, with Orff Schulwerk, he developed it with Gunold Keetman, and he developed a new way of music education that utilizes play to capture children's attention. Teachers are to design lesson plans that set kids up for success while making sure that they're having fun. And they stress that Orff Schulwerk is not a method of teaching, but it's rather a intuitive process that a teacher can use to be most effective. Most notably, especially when we're teaching about learning how to read music, there's no specific way to go about it. You can either choose to teach them by rote, or teach them various ways of using different pictures, or just assigning something to a different syllable or picture and associating that and basically tricking them to learn how to read music. So some of the principles of this method is that you want to develop individuals who are competent, and they will have the confidence to help and engage other kids. It also stresses the importance of singing, rhymes, patterns, dancing, moving, and movement. And exercises frequently involve games with singing. And most of the time they have songs with words that sometimes don't make sense, which is okay. For example, this little exercise that says, "Acca bacca soda cracker, acca bacca boo, acca bacca soda cracker, out goes you." So with that little exercise, there's already an introduction to rhythm, pulse, steadiness, and a sensitivity to musical possibilities. So with this, everything is possible, and you can teach the kids how to keep steady. You could even teach dynamics with this, especially when you're saying "out goes you." The first stanza could be super quiet, and then the next one could be super loud. It's like I said, this is all intuitive, and there's no one specific way to go about this. So with the Orff Schulwerk method, there's a lot of instrumental playing, and a lot of them have to do with singing or body percussion or even unpitched percussion. So some of these include playing the jingles, cymbals, tambourine, cowbell, hand drums, vibroslap, just a lot of unpitched percussion. Some of them also include using your body, and you can be snapping, clapping, slapping your thigh, and they call that patching, and snapping your feet. And there's also a lot of songs that include movement and games and whatnot. So for materials, the Orff Schulwerk uses, they first came out with a set of volumes 1 through 4, and that was for exploration. And originally, they talked about children's heritage as a basis for some of the songs. They ensure that they're easy to relate to and identify with, and now all those books have been translated into almost every language. And Orff work isn't limited to those songs as well. You can use just about any other song that you'd like. So there are 4 main points in this pedagogy. There's exploration, which is discovering all musical possibilities. There's improv, which is making things up as you go, and that helps develop skills to further explore and try new things and ideas. There's also imitation, which helps develop skills through demonstration and copying. So I play something, and then the students will play something else, or the students do something, and then I copy them, or vice versa. And then creation, which is them creating their own music and style and everything. And that is basically using all available knowledge and to create something brand new and exciting. So, like I said, there's no specific process towards this method. The main goals are having a lot of fun and doing a lot of playing. And reading music and oral skills are really important, but they're not necessarily the main goal. The main goal is just to create musicians and unlock the possibilities of music and letting the kids have fun.
Okay, so what we have here on your screen in front of you is music learning theory, MLT for short, which is also known as the Gordon approach. This quote reads, "Our music learning potentials and our music learning achievements are based on our music thinking. Most importantly, that music thinking goes beyond mere imitation and leads to music comprehension." Mr. Edwin E. Gordon started off studying string bass at the Eastman School of Music. He earned a second master's degree from the Ohio University College of Education. Later, he had taught while under a fellowship at the University of Iowa in the 1950s. What started music learning theory really is when he became interested in how humans learn music. So what he decided to do was develop the music aptitude profile in 1965, the Iowa tests of music literacy in 1971, and the psychology of music teaching 1971. This was the first introduction of music learning theory. Now, before we go on to explain music learning theory, we need to learn what audiation is. And so audiation really is just hearing before playing and singing. Okay, so music learning theory is a set of ideas about how humans learn music through audiation, hearing before playing and singing. On the next slide, you'll see a photo which explains the preparatory audiation, including different ages and different sections of what each student might go through in their lives having to do with audiation. Okay, so on the left side, you'll see it has acculturation, imitation, assimilation. On the right side, there's more steps: absorption, random response, purposeful response, shedding, egocentricity, breaking the code, introspection, and coordination. Back to the left side, it just shows the ages of when those certain things will happen. And on the right side, again, it gives a definition for each word so we can better understand what exactly it's talking about. Moving on to the next slide, this discusses the philosophy, these are the main points in the philosophy of music learning theory. We would discuss music aptitude versus music achievement. Aptitude really is just the possibility for music achievement, and achievement is actually the realization of that possibility. Okay. Music and language parallels and differences. Children learn by developing 5 vocabularies. We all know this: listening, speaking, reading, thinking, and writing, which are incredibly important to the development of the human brain, believe it or not. Depth of vocabulary would depend on the depth of language in the environment. So really the combination of heard language variety and repeated language exposure allows the infant's listening vocabulary to expand and also becomes a foundation for all other language vocabularies. Audiation activities. There's music imitation, rhythm chants, songs, rhythm patterns, tonal patterns. Music comprehension would include music comparison, past and present. General considerations are necessary for students to reap the benefits of audiation, and understand and internalize meter, rhythm, and tempo. These things are incredibly important. So, to explain a little bit more, the students may learn many of these things by rote. Either way, we're just concerned that they're learning. As children develop their audiation skills, they may engage in music imitation as they learn the chants, the songs, the rhythm patterns, so on and so forth. But they also engage in music comprehension as they compare the music they're hearing or performing to music they have heard or music they are predicting they will hear. To dig deeper into topics of importance with keeping the students engaged, we could discuss how not to be so technical when talking to students so they can remain engaged and learn the same, if not more, from having fun. Even though we don't want to be so technical, we still have to be right when discussing the proper breathing, posture, and many other qualities that will make a student a better musician. Combined learning sequence activities and classroom activities. There's 3 steps. We need to experience the music holistically. We need to examine parts through tonal and rhythmic patterns. And the 3rd step would be experience holistically, again, with increased understanding and comprehension. So really, what's going on here is that in this 3-step process, they're figuring out what they really want, what they really like about the music. That's what they're learning about. And then they examine the tone and the rhythm, which will then, in the end, as I said in step 3, give them a better understanding and better knowledge of the music. Okay. And lastly but not least, we have solfege. And so there's tonal and rhythmic solfege. So tonal solfege, what that is, it allows a student to recognize and audiate characteristic patterns, which are incredibly important. Rhythmic solfege is comparing patterns in meters, not individual durations. That is really important as well. When a student audiates rhythm, the student would compare rhythm patterns in meters, not individual durations, as I said. But when using tonal solfege, you're recognizing and audiating the characteristic patterns of each tonality without prematurely resorting to notation and theoretical understanding. It is incredibly important that students can do this.
Next, we will be discussing Dalcroze Eurythmics. Dalcroze was a Swiss composer, musician, educator, and philosopher. He was immersed in music from early childhood as his mother was a professional musician. Later, he studied with Fauré, Delibes, and even Bruckner. When he was 27, he became a professor at the Geneva Conservatory in Switzerland. He began developing the Dalcroze approach here when he'd noticed that his students weren't internalizing the rhythm and expression of the music that they were working on. After experimenting with the movement with his students, the school board requested a meeting with him. At the time, getting students to dance along with music in a less structured environment in bare feet was considered radical. The most important part about the solfege when it comes to Dalcroze is that it is associated with rhythm and movement. It originated using the French fixed do system. Dalcroze scales are consisted of dyad, trichord, and tetrachord, so the first 2, 3, and 4 notes of the scale. Using a smaller range of notes gives the students a greater chance of success. This will help them develop sensitivity to pitches and their interrelations. One of the most important reasons solfege is implemented is to learn to improvise at the piano. It begins in the body, then the voice, and finally on the piano. For younger students, it will look more like the teacher playing the piano while some students improvise movement and other students improvise with the drum. The intention while working on improvising here is to develop the ability to communicate musical intent and to improve response time. Eurythmics is considered the core of the Dalcroze approach, and the last to be developed. It is basically rhythmic movement to music. By moving, the student begins to internalize the rhythm and movement. This helps the student learn to sense the space between beats, audiate, experience symmetry, balance, and rhythmic accuracy. Most lessons will start with walking to music with tempo, dynamic, and phrase variation. Next, the teacher will display bilateral arm movements in tempo which the students will mirror. The reason it begins with bilateral movement is because many younger children haven't developed the ability to use the left and right sides of the brain individually. Students need to work in partners or in small groups. This helps the student feel more comfortable with the activity and is an opportunity to practice their nonverbal communication skills. The Dalcroze approach incorporates objects very heavily, especially for younger students. This gives the student another physical representation for the flow of rhythm that they are trying to internalize. Hoops can be used with a parent or partner in order to help a student along who might be having trouble sensing the rhythm. Ultimately, by associating movement with music, the mind processes that movement as emotion, which leads to a more developed comprehension.